Okay, let me ask you something. What would you do? What would any of us do if a doctor told you that you had exactly 17 days to live? That's the starting point for this incredible story. We're going to explore the personal account of a man named Ajay, whose deeply held faith was about to be put through the ultimate test by an absolutely devastating medical diagnosis. 17 days, and then life is over. I mean, can you even imagine? According to his testimony, those were the words that just completely shattered his world. It wasn't a prognosis, right? It was a deadline, a countdown, not to some happy event, but to, well, the end of everything. So that really brings us to the core question of his journey, right? It's the whole reason we're digging into this. What actually happens when a lifetime of incredibly deep, intense faith just slams headfirst into a medical reality that seems, well, completely hopeless? Let's dive in and see how his story unfolds. All right, so to really get the weight of this crisis, we first have to understand the man himself. We've got to look at what Ajay's life was like before all of this happened, before the very foundation of his faith was shaken to its core. Now, to be really clear here, Ajay wasn't just some casual believer. We're not talking about someone who just went to the temple on holidays. His entire life was structured around intense ritual. I mean, daily worship at home, regular temple visits, these really demanding 9-day fasts. But it gets even more intense. His testimony describes how his devotion was so extreme that he would offer his own blood to the goddess Kali. So yeah, this was a man who was, in every sense of the word, completely and physically all in on his faith. And then, bam, reality hits. The diagnosis was terminal kidney failure, and it was bad. Both of his kidneys had failed. One had already been surgically removed. The one he had left was so badly damaged that the doctors basically said, "You've got 17 days. After that, it's going to fail too." And, as if that wasn't devastating enough, on top of this medical crisis was a financial one. A kidney transplant was the only option, but the estimated cost was somewhere between 3.5 to 4 lakh rupees. For his family, that was an impossible amount of money. So he wasn't just facing a medical deadline, he was staring at a financial dead end. Just no way out. So you can see how this all spiraled into a massive spiritual crisis. According to his own account, all those years, all that intense worship, the fasting, the physical sacrifice, when he needed it most, it brought him zero comfort. No solution. Nothing. He was just left feeling completely and utterly abandoned, and of course, absolutely terrified. So here he is. Medicine says there's no cure. His bank account says there are no options, and his lifelong faith, it's giving him no comfort. Ajay had truly hit rock bottom, and it was right there, in that moment, with every single familiar road completely closed off, that someone offered him a totally different path. This right here is the moment everything starts to shift. It's like two worlds colliding. As he's sitting there just lost in his despair, a Christian woman comes up to him, and Ajay, being skeptical, asks a really logical, pragmatic question. He says, look, if Jesus heals, then why do we have hospitals and doctors? Why don't they just shut down? And her answer, it wasn't an argument. It was a completely different way of seeing things. She just said, where man's power ends, God's work begins. And that line, it just stuck with him. According to his testimony, he's facing what he believes is certain death. He has absolutely nothing left to lose. And so he makes a decision that honestly would have been completely unthinkable for him just a few weeks earlier. He agrees to go to a church for the very first time in his entire life. And this is where we get to the real heart of his story, the test of time. That 17-day countdown the doctors gave him, well, the clock was officially and very seriously ticking. So he goes. And his first experience in this completely new environment, well, he's super cautious. He talks about walking in hesitantly and just noticing how peaceful it felt. So different from anything he was used to. Then, the pastor tells everyone to place a hand on whatever part of their body is in pain. So Ajay does. He puts his hand over his kidney. And he whispers this really simple, really desperate prayer. Just, if you are real, then save me. So let's look at what happened next. It's all about the timeline. Day 1, he starts marking off the days on a calendar, just filled with fear. Then comes the huge moment, day 17, the doctor's deadline, and it passes. He's still alive. A little while later, around day 30, he says the pain is actually starting to go down. Hope is starting to creep in. And by day 90, he says he feels completely healthy. That countdown to his death had literally turned into a timeline of his recovery.
Okay, so this is the real climax of this whole ordeal. He goes back to the hospital, he gets the tests done, and according to his testimony, the medical report left his doctor in a state of complete shock, because what it showed, medically, was that his one remaining kidney was functioning completely, 100% normally.
Wow. So, what do you do after something like that happens? I mean, where do you go from there? This final part of his story is all about his new beginning and how his life was completely, and I mean completely, reoriented. He says in his testimony that this one specific verse from the Bible just hit him so hard. It totally reframed how he saw everything, not just life, but death too. And that constant fear that he'd been living with for so long, it finally started to fade away. And this whole experience, it gave him a brand new mission in life. He completely turned away from all his old rituals, especially the physical sacrifices. Instead, he dedicated his life to serving other people. His goal was now to share his story, to help others who felt lost in fear and superstition. He came to believe that true miracles, from his new perspective, didn't come from ritual, but from faith and from love. And here's maybe the most incredible part, the postscript to that terrifying 17-day deadline. The testimony states that 20 years later, 20 years after being told he had just over 2 weeks to live, Ajay is healthy, and he's still out there sharing his incredible story. Which really leaves us with one final big question to think about. When you look at his personal account, a journey that starts with intense physical rituals and sacrifices and ends with a deeply internal, personal belief, where do you think a story like Ajay's draws the line between superstition and faith?